Daniel Parker had everything most people dreamed of: luxury cars, a mansion that looked like it belonged in a Hollywood movie, and a bank account that never seemed to run dry, no matter how much he spent. At 42, he was a proud owner of one of the largest hotel chains in the country, to the world. He was the epitome of success. People admired him, envied him, and often assumed his life was perfect. But underneath the glittering surface, Daniel carried a weight he rarely spoke of, a hollow ache deep in his chest, one that he couldn't ignore, no matter how many business deals he closed or how many parties he attended. This sadness had been there since childhood. It was the absence of a mother he could never truly understand. His parents had disappeared when he was young, lost in a tragic accident. Or at least, that's what he was told. His Aunt Ramona, who had been a second mother to him, was always there with a comforting lie that his parents were gone and that it was best not to dwell on it. But that night, something inside him snapped. It was a cold Friday, and Daniel had had enough. Enough of the meetings, the lavish events, the superficiality that filled his life. He felt disconnected, as if he were living someone else's life. He was tired of chasing success that never felt fulfilling. He called his secretary and asked her to find a nursing home. Not just any home, but one that truly needed help, a place where his donation could make a real difference. And so, Daniel found himself heading to the San Felipe neighborhood, a place he never thought he'd step foot in. It was a run-down nursing home, with cracked walls and a musty smell that seemed to permeate everything. As Daniel stepped out of his sleek black SUV, the director of the facility, a short woman with bright red-dyed hair, greeted him with the kind of enthusiasm that made him feel like a celebrity. It was all part of the plan. Make a donation, take a picture for the company's social media, and leave. But the moment he stepped inside, everything changed. The air felt heavy, saturated with sadness, but there was something else, something inexplicable that tugged at his soul. He walked down the dimly lit hallway, passing elderly residents sitting in broken chairs, some sleeping, others staring blankly at the television. Then, in a small corner by a window with grime streaking down the glass, he saw her, an old woman, hair white and wild, wrinkled skin, but a gaze that stopped him in his tracks. There was something about her, something unsettlingly familiar. He didn't know why, but he couldn't stop staring at her. It was as though his body was telling him, "You know her." Slowly, Daniel moved closer. His hand trembled slightly, something he was unaccustomed to. He was always a confident, composed businessman, but in that moment, he felt like a stranger to himself. The woman looked up, as if she felt his gaze before he even stepped closer. Her eyes locked with his, and for a split second, time seemed to freeze. She wasn't the most well-dressed, nor the one who stood out the most in the room, but there was something in her face, a tilt of her head, the way her eyes met his, that stirred something in his chest. Before he knew it, Daniel was standing right in front of her, looking down into her eyes. She lifted a shaky hand and placed it gently on his cheek. The touch was so soft, so familiar, it sent a chill through him. He could barely hear her whisper, but it sounded like his name. "Daniel," she muttered, just barely audible. His heart skipped a beat. No, it couldn't be, he thought. Could this woman, sitting in a forgotten corner of this nursing home, actually be the one person he had spent his entire life searching for? His mother? The air around him felt thick, as if the ground beneath him was about to give way. His mind raced, trying to piece together the impossibility of it all. The director, seeing his shock, quickly approached. "This is Carmen," she said, her voice carrying an almost dismissive tone. "She's been here for years. No family, barely speaks, mostly just stares into space." Daniel's mind was reeling. Carmen? This woman who looked at him as though she knew him? There was no way it could be her. He asked the director how she ended up here, but the woman only shrugged. "The oldest records were lost in a flood years ago," she explained. "She's been here as long as anyone can remember." Daniel didn't care about the records, the donations, or the photo op. Something about Carmen was calling to him. He couldn't leave without knowing the truth. He leaned closer to her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Do you know who I am?" he asked softly, his voice shaking despite himself. Carmen didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her eyes, filled with recognition, said everything. And in that instant, Daniel knew. The truth he had long buried was staring back at him. But he didn't want to believe it. Not yet. Not here. As Daniel walked out of the nursing home, his mind was a storm of emotions. The wealthy, successful man that everyone envied, who had it all, was now faced with a past he didn't know existed. What if everything he believed about his life was a lie? He glanced back at the building in the rearview mirror, but the answer was elusive. Who was Carmen? And why had she been hidden from him all these years? The answers were just beyond his reach, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to rest until he uncovered the truth. Daniel didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, the image of Carmen, sitting in that dimly lit corner, touched his mind like a ghost. The soft touch of her hand against his cheek, the whisper of his name. It was all too surreal to comprehend. How could she know his name? Why did she seem so familiar? He had to know more. The following morning, Daniel woke up early, the weight of the previous night hanging heavy on his chest. He tried to push the thoughts aside, to focus on the tasks ahead, meetings, business deals, the never-ending demands of his company. But no matter how much he tried to focus, his mind kept drifting back to the nursing home, to Carmen. He couldn't ignore it. Something inside him refused to let go. What if the answers to the questions that haunted him for years were locked away in that nursing home, hidden by time and lies? What if his life, his entire past, was built on a foundation of secrets? Determined to uncover the truth, Daniel arranged for a private meeting with the director of a nursing home, Mrs. Miller. He needed answers. When he arrived, she greeted him with her usual forced smile, but there was a wariness in her eyes, as though she had already sensed that Daniel wasn't just another wealthy benefactor. He was someone who wanted more than just a donation. "Good morning, Mr. Parker," she said, ushering him into her office. "I'm glad you could return. We don't often see people coming back once they've made their donations." "I need to know more about Carmen," Daniel said, without wasting time. "What can you tell me about her? How did she end up here?" Mrs. Miller hesitated, her eyes darting to the side, as though trying to find a way out of answering the question. "Well, as I told you before, there are no family records for her. She's been here for years, decades. In fact, she doesn't have anyone who comes to visit. There are no relatives on file." "I know what you told me," Daniel said, leaning forward, "but I need to know the whole story. How did she get here? Who brought her in?" The director sighed, clearly uncomfortable. "There's a lot about her past that's been lost over time," she said, her voice softening. "But what I do know is that she came here many years ago. A woman, possibly a relative, brought her in, but the records were destroyed in a flood. And, well, it's all a bit of a mystery." Daniel's mind was racing. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly starting to come together, but they didn't make sense. Carmen's arrival at the nursing home, her memory loss, her inability to communicate. There had to be more, and Daniel wasn't going to rest until he got the answers. That afternoon, Daniel made his way to the new ward where Carmen was placed. The air was thick with tension as he walked through the sterile halls, his footsteps echoing off the walls. When he found Carmen, she was sitting in a quiet room, staring out the window. Her eyes didn't seem to focus on anything in particular, but Daniel could feel the weight of her gaze. It was as if she was waiting for something, or someone. He approached her slowly, trying not to disturb her too suddenly. As he stood in front of her, their eyes met. There was no immediate recognition, no sign that she remembered him, but there was something in her expression that stirred deep within him. It was the same feeling he had when he first saw her, the overwhelming sense that she knew him, even if her mind couldn't quite recall the details. "Carmen," he said softly, his voice trembling with emotion, "I know you probably don't remember me, but I need to know. I need to understand." Carmen didn't respond. She didn't speak at all. But then, in a move that shook him to his core, she raised her trembling hand and placed on his cheek once again. The touch was gentle, but there was something profound in it. Daniel felt the familiar warmth of a mother's love, and he couldn't help but let the tears slip down his face. "Do you remember me?" he whispered. Her eyes softened, and she muttered one word, a word that shook Daniel to his very soul. "Dan." In that one moment, Daniel's world shattered. The truth was undeniable. Carmen, this woman who had been hidden from him for so many years, was his mother, and everything he thought he knew about his life, his past, was a lie. He stumbled back, trying to process everything that had just happened. The world felt like it was spinning out of control. There was so much he didn't understand, so many questions he needed to answer. But one thing was clear. He would stop at nothing to uncover the truth. Sometimes, the past has a way of creeping back into our lives, forcing us to confront truths we never want to face. For Daniel, this moment marked the beginning of a journey that would uncover not just the secrets of his mother's disappearance, but the truth about his entire life. Sometimes, the answers we seek are closer than we think, waiting to be uncovered. Daniel woke up the next morning with a sense of urgency that he couldn't shake off. The image of Carmen, sitting in that nursing home with eyes full of recognition, was etched into his mind. That moment, when she whispered his name, felt like a door had just been opened, a door that had been locked away for years. He knew he had to get answers, but he didn't know where to start. He couldn't keep walking around, pretending that everything was fine. His perfectly polished world, with all its success and luxury, had just been cracked open. The truth was out there, and he had to find it. Without wasting any time, Daniel contacted James Collins, the private investigator who had helped him with some business matters in the past. He needed someone who could dig deep, who wasn't afraid to uncover uncomfortable truths. James was the kind of man who didn't shy away from the dark corners of people's lives. If anyone could help him find out what had really happened to his mother, it was James. As soon as James agreed to take the case, Daniel's mind raced with 1,000 questions. What if his entire life was based on lies? What if Carmen was really his mother, as his gut told him? And what if Aunt Ramona, who had raised him, who had been his rock, had hidden the truth from him all these years? His stomach churned with anger at the thought of being deceived, but he pushed it aside. There would be time to deal with the betrayal later. Right now, he had to focus on finding Carmen and uncovering the truth about what had happened to her and to him. Later that afternoon, Daniel met James Collins in a quiet cafe in the city. James, a tall man with a rough exterior, sat across from him, sipping his coffee. His face was serious, and Daniel could tell he was already processing the information Daniel had given him. "So, you think this woman at the nursing home is your mother?" James asked, eyeing Daniel with a sharp gaze. Daniel nodded. "I don't know for sure, but I have this feeling. Something in my gut tells me I'm right. She called me Leo. That's what my aunt used to call me when I was a kid. It's a family nickname." James paused, carefully considering the information. That's a strong lead. But we'll need more than a nickname to go on. I'll start by looking into the records from a nursing home. See if we can find anything on Carmen's past. I'll also dig into your family history. See if there's anything that doesn't add up. Daniel leaned forward, his hands clenched tightly on the table. "I need answers, James. I need to know who she is, and why she was kept hidden from me for so long." James gave a slight nod. "I'll do what I can, but be prepared. The truth can be messy. Sometimes, the answers we find aren't what we expect." The next few days were a blur of phone calls, research, and hours spent in libraries. James worked tirelessly, combing through public records, digging into old newspapers, and reaching out to his network of contacts. Daniel, meanwhile, tried to keep his mind off the investigation. He buried himself in work, in meetings, in the daily grind that had always been his escape from the past. But no matter how hard he tried to focus on business, his thoughts kept drifting back to Carmen. One night, unable to sleep, Daniel sat at his desk, staring at the photo of Carmen he had taken during his visit to the nursing home. The photo was grainy and blurry, but it was the only connection he had to her. He wondered how someone could live for so many years in a place like that, forgotten, abandoned, lost to the world. And why had no one ever told him about her? As the night wore on, Daniel's phone buzzed. It was James. "I've got something," James said, his voice low but urgent. "I've managed to track down some records. Carmen was admitted to a hospital many years ago, right around the time your parents were supposedly killed in that accident. It looks like she was injured, but not severely. The strange part is, after she left the hospital, she vanished. There's no record of her anywhere, and the paperwork is a mess. But there's something else. Someone signed for her release. Daniel's heart raced. Who? Who signed for her? James hesitated. It was a woman named Ramona Ortega. Daniel felt the world tilt beneath him. Ramona, his aunt, the woman who had raised him, who had always been there for him. She had signed for his mother's release. She had known what happened to Carmen. His head spun with confusion, betrayal, and disbelief. Could this really be happening? Was his whole life built on a lie? He didn't waste a second. He stood up, grabbed his coat, and stormed out his office. His hands were shaking, his heart pounding in his chest. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to confront Ramona. He had to know the truth. As Daniel made his way to Aunt Ramona's house, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything he believed in was about to come crashing down. His entire world, the life he had built, the success, the wealth, it all felt meaningless in that moment. The only thing that mattered now was uncovering the truth about his mother, Carmen, and why Ramona had kept him in the dark for so many years. The truth was closer than he ever imagined, and the answers he sought were waiting to be revealed. In life, we often think we know the truth, but sometimes the truth is hidden behind a veil of lies and deception. Daniel's search for answers is just beginning, but already his world is changing. What do we do when everything we thought we knew turns out to be a lie? The journey ahead won't be easy, but sometimes the most difficult path is the one that leads us to the truth. The drive to Aunt Ramona's house felt like an eternity. Daniel's mind was racing with a million questions, but no answers. The thought of confronting Ramona, someone who had been a protector, his mother figure, was overwhelming. How could she have kept such a huge secret from him? And why? As he pulled into her driveway, the familiar sight of the old house only added to the weight in his chest. The house was just as it had always been, neat, tidy, with the same garden he had tended to as a child. But it now felt like a house of lies, a place where everything he believed about his past was being unraveled. He took a deep breath, stepped out of the car, and walked up to the front door. His hand trembled slightly as he knocked. Ramona answered the door quickly, a smile on her face, but the moment she saw his expression, that smile faltered. There was no warmth in her eyes, no comfort, just a nervous flicker. "Daniel? What's wrong?" she asked, her voice a little too calm. It was the same voice she had always used when comforting him, but today it felt false. "I need to talk to you," Daniel said, his voice steady but firm. "We need to talk about Carmen." Ramona's face went pale, and for a moment she didn't say anything. She looked at him, then looked away, clearly tried to decide what to say. Finally, she stepped aside and motioned for him to enter. "Come in," she said softly, "but we should talk in the living room." As they sat down on the couch, Daniel didn't waste any time. He pulled out the papers James had found and laid them on the coffee table in front of her. The act of placing those documents in front of her felt like a declaration, an accusation. "Ramona," he began, his voice low but intense, "I know about Carmen. I know you were the one who signed her out of the hospital after the accident, and I know you've been hiding her from me all these years." Ramona's face crumpled, the facade she had maintained for so long slipping away. She opened her mouth to speak, but couldn't find the words. "Why? Why did you lie to me all these years? Why didn't you tell me the truth about my mother?" Daniel's voice cracked slightly, but he pushed through. He wasn't going to let her hide behind her excuses anymore. Ramona's hands trembled in her lap. She looked down at the floor, avoiding his gaze. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought it was better to let you live your life without the pain of knowing the truth." Daniel's heart raced. "The truth? You think this is the truth? That I've been living my entire life thinking my parents were dead and that I had no one? You kept me in the dark, Ramona. You robbed me of knowing the real story of my mother." Ramona's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. "Not yet. You're not telling me everything," Daniel continued, his voice hardening. "Carmen isn't just some stranger. She's my mother, and I need to know why she was abandoned, why she was left to fade away in that nursing home. For a long time, Ramona didn't say anything. She sat there, her hands wringing in her lap, the guilt written all over her face. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she looked up at him. "I couldn't let you know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't let you know what happened to her. She was sick, Daniel. After the accident, she lost herself. Her mind was never the same. And I couldn't bear the thought of you seeing her like that. I thought it would be better to let you believe she was dead, to protect you from the truth." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't process what he was hearing. This wasn't the woman he had grown up with. This wasn't the Aunt Ramona who had raised him, who had loved him unconditionally. This was someone else, someone hiding the darkest secrets of his life. "You made me believe she was dead. You made me live this whole lie." Daniel's anger boiled over, but there was something deeper beneath the rage, a profound sense of betrayal. Ramona broke down in tears. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she sobbed. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought it was the right thing to do, but I see now that I was wrong. I should have told you the truth. You deserve to know everything." Daniel was reeling from the flood of emotions. His mind was spinning. He had spent his entire life believing one thing, and now it was all crashing down around him. But there was more. Ramona wasn't finished. Through her tears, she continued speaking. "There's something else you need to know," she said, her voice trembling. "Carmen wasn't just sick. She was involved in something dangerous, something that would have ruined our family. I couldn't let you be a part of that." Daniel's heart stopped. "What do you mean? What kind of danger?" Ramona hesitated, looking away, as though the truth was too much for her to bear. "I'm not proud of it, Daniel. Your mother got mixed up with the wrong people. There were threats, money, and lies, things she couldn't escape. I had to protect you. I had to keep you away from that world. And I thought the only way to do that was to keep her hidden, keep you safe from it." Daniel's mind was a whirlwind. He couldn't understand what he was hearing. His mother, involved with dangerous people? He never imagined this kind of life for her. It was too much to process, too many layers of lies and secrets. "I don't care about that anymore," Daniel said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I just want to know the truth. I want to know why she was hidden from me, and why you lied to me for so many years." Ramona wiped her tears and nodded, knowing that there was no turning back. "I'll tell you everything, Daniel, but you have to be ready for what's to come. The truth will change everything." The conversation left Daniel with more questions than answers. The woman who had raised him, who had been his rock, was now the source of his pain. The truth he had been searching for had just begun to surface, and he had no idea where it would lead him. But one thing was clear. He couldn't turn back now. The truth was out there, and Daniel was determined to uncover every last detail, no matter how painful it would be. Sometimes, the truth we seek can tear apart the lives we built, but it's only through confronting the past that we can truly move forward. For Daniel, the path ahead is uncertain, but one thing is certain. He will stop at nothing to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Daniel's days were consumed by his need for answers. The information James had uncovered was just the beginning. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the truth was tangled in a web of secrets and lies that had been woven into the very fabric of his life. He couldn't let go. Not now. Not after all the signs that pointed toward Carmen being his mother. Every morning, Daniel went over the documents James had sent him, studying them over and over again, searching for something he might have missed. His mind was a whirlpool of questions. How could his mother be alive? Why had Ramona kept him in the dark? And what else was his aunt hiding? Daniel knew he had to confront Ramona again. But this time he was prepared. He had the evidence now. He had proof that his life had been built on lies. He went to his office early one morning, and his hands were steady as he dialed the number for James. "James, I need more. I need everything. I want to know everything about my mother, where she was, who she was with, and what happened after the accident." James's voice on the other end was calm but firm. "You're getting closer, Daniel. But the deeper you dig, the more complicated this will become. Be prepared. Some truths are more painful than others." Daniel hung up, his determination growing stronger. He couldn't stop now. He wasn't just seeking the truth for himself. He was seeking it for the mother he never really knew, for the woman who had been erased from his life. That afternoon, Daniel found himself back at Aunt Ramona's house. The same house he had grown up in, the house that had been his sanctuary from the world. But now it felt like a prison, a place where secrets festered, waiting to be uncovered. When he arrived, Ramona greeted him at the door, but her expression was guarded, wary. She knew something was coming. "I need to speak with you, Ramona," Daniel said, his voice firm as he walked inside. "I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth." Ramona's face paled and she stepped back, as if trying to avoid the confrontation. "Daniel, I've told you everything I know. I've already explained." "No, you haven't," Daniel interrupted, his voice rising. "You've been lying to me my entire life. You signed the papers for Carmen's release. You kept her hidden from me. And now I need to know why." Ramona's eyes darted to the side, unable to meet his gaze. Her hands were trembling as she gripped the doorframe, her face a mixture of guilt and fear. "I did to protect you," she whispered, barely audible. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't want you to have to deal with the truth. Your mother, she was involved in things, dangerous things, things I couldn't let you be a part of." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. "What things? What are you talking about?" Ramona hesitated, her voice quivering as she finally spoke. "She got involved with some very dangerous people. There was money, debts, and violence. I couldn't let you be a part of that. I couldn't let you know what she was really like. It would have destroyed you." Daniel's mind was reeling. His mother, the woman he had always wondered about, was entangled in a dark world that he had never imagined. He had no more. He had to understand what had really happened. That evening, Daniel sat at his desk, staring at the documents in front of him. His thoughts raced, trying to piece everything together. He thought about Carmen, about the moment they shared at the nursing home when she had whispered his name. He couldn't let go of that moment, that connection. James had found more records, more details about his mother's past. Carmen had been hospitalized after the accident, but the records were incomplete. James had found traces of a woman named Sophia, a name that kept appearing in connection with Carmen. But who was she? And what role did she play in the secrets that had been hidden for so long? Daniel felt a wave of frustration. The answers were out there, but they were just out of reach. He couldn't do this alone. He needed someone who could dig deeper, someone who knew the underworld of the people his mother had been involved with. He picked up his phone and made another call. This time, it wasn't to James. It was to someone who could help him get closer to the truth. The private investigator, Mario Sanian, the man who had helped him solve business mysteries in the past. The next day, Mario met Daniel at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. Mario had a no-nonsense attitude, and Daniel knew that if anyone could help him uncover the last pieces of the puzzle, it was Mario. "I've found something," Mario said as he slid a manila envelope across the table. "I've been digging into Carmen's history, and there's something you need to see." Daniel opened the envelope, his hands shaking. Inside were more documents, more photographs, and a name, Sofia Ortega. He stared at the papers, trying to understand what they meant. Mario leaned in, his voice low. Sofia Ortega wasn't just a friend. She was involved in the same world as Carmen, and it looks like she played a major role in Carmen's disappearance. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. "Sofia, is she still alive?" Mario nodded. "I don't know, but I've got leads. We can track her down. But Daniel, once you open this door, there's no turning back." Daniel nodded. He didn't care. He had to know. He was ready to confront the past, no matter what it revealed. Daniel sat back in his chair, the weight of the new information pressing down on him. The truth was closer than ever, but it was still a dangerous path to walk. He had already lost so much. But now, nothing mattered more than finding out the truth about his mother, and the secrets that had been buried for so long. As he looked out the window, he realized one thing. The past was no longer something he could avoid. It was time to face it. The past has a way of staying with us, buried deep in our memories, waiting for the right moment to resurface. For Daniel, the moment had arrived. But as the truth begins to unfold, He must ask himself, is he ready for what he's about to discover? Sometimes, facing the past means confronting things we'd rather not know. But it is through this confrontation that we find our true selves. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the edge of something monumental. Each new piece of information he uncovered only seemed to deepen the mystery. The more he dug into Carmen's past, the more he realized that the truth about his mother wasn't just buried in old records. It was tangled in a web of deception that stretched far beyond what he had imagined. His mind kept drifting back to the name that had emerged over and over in the documents James and Mario had found. Sofia Ortega. Who was she? What was her connection to Carmen? And why had Ramona gone to such lengths to keep all of this hidden? Daniel had spent the last few days in a frenzy of research, sifting through papers and photographs, trying to piece together the puzzle. But the more he learned, the more the pieces refused to fit together. And each unanswered question made him more desperate for the truth. His relationship with Ramona had always been one of trust. She had raised him, loved him, and protected him after his parents' supposed death. But now, Daniel was starting to see a side of her he never knew existed. She had lied to him, kept secrets, and erased the woman who had given him life. But something about Sofia Ortega nagged at him. There was more to this story. Something darker, something that involved people far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The phone call came early one morning. It was Mario. The private investigator had found something important, something that would take the investigation to a whole new level. "I've got a lead on Sofia Ortega," Mario said, his voice low and urgent. "She's connected to some dangerous people. I've traced her movements to a small town outside the city. And there's more. She was linked to a network of people who were involved in underground operations. Your mother, Carmen, might have been wrapped up in all of this." Daniel's heart raced. This was more than he had bargained for. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they were forming was not one he had expected. His mother, the woman he had always imagined as a victim, was somehow tied to a world of crime and danger. "What do you mean, underground operations?" Daniel asked, his voice shaky. Mario sighed. "There's a lot of money involved. There were rumors that Carmen got caught up in something she couldn't escape from. I'm still digging into it. But from what I found, it looks like she was either in too deep or trying to get out. And Sofia? She's one of the people who might know the whole story." Daniel felt the walls closing in around him. This wasn't the truth he had been prepared to find. His world, the one he had built with ambition and hard work, was starting to feel like a facade. How could he have lived his entire life not knowing about this hidden side of his mother? With Mario's help, Daniel made a decision. He was going to find Sofia Ortega, no matter the cost. He had to know the full story, even if it meant facing a truth darker than he had ever imagined. He drove out to the small town where Sofia was supposedly living. The drive felt like a journey to the unknown. The quiet countryside, the endless fields, and the small houses that dotted the landscape seemed to close in on him, reflecting the pressure he felt in his chest. When he arrived, he found the small house where Sofia had been living. It was a modest place, nothing like the luxury he was used to, but there was something unsettling about it. The windows were dark, and the door was slightly ajar, as if someone had just left in a hurry. He knocked, his heart pounding in his chest. There was no answer. He knocked again, louder this time, but still no one came. As he turned to leave, a figure appeared in the doorway. A woman with short, dark hair and intense gaze. It was Sofia. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cautious but curious. Daniel's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. He didn't know how to begin, but he knew one thing for sure. He needed to know the truth. "Sofia," Daniel said, his voice calm but unwavering, "I need to know what happened to my mother. I need to understand what she was involved in, and why you've been kept hidden all these years." Sofia studied him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing as she processed his words. And then, with a slow, deliberate motion, she stepped aside, allowing him into the house. "Come in," she said quietly, "but be prepared for what you're about to hear. The truth isn't what you think it is." Daniel stepped inside, his heart racing with anticipation and fear. He had no idea what Sofia would reveal, but one thing was clear. This was the beginning of the end of the story. And no matter what he learned, there was no turning back now. The truth is a powerful force. Sometimes we think we're ready for it, but when it comes, it changes everything. Daniel's search for answers has led him down a path of discovery. But the deeper he goes, the more dangerous it becomes. Will the truth heal him, or will it destroy everything he thought he knew about his past? Daniel stood in front of Ramona's house, his chest tight, with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Every step he had taken to uncover the truth had led him here, to this moment, and yet he still didn't feel ready. He had spent years living in the shadow of lies, believing the version of his life that had been carefully constructed by those around him. Now, the truth was unraveling piece by painful piece, and he didn't know if he was prepared for consequences. The car ride from a cafe with Sophia had been silent, filled with nothing but the hum of the engine and the weight of what she had revealed. Her cryptic words echoed in his mind. You think you want the truth, but sometimes the truth can destroy everything. Daniel wasn't sure if he was ready for that kind of destruction, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't live in the dark any longer. He knocked on the door, his hand trembling slightly. It was as if the house, the place that had once been his sanctuary, was now a prison, holding the truth he had spent his whole life trying to ignore. When Ramona answered the door, she looked shocked to see him standing there again, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral, though he could hear the slight tremor beneath her words. "I need answers, Ramona," Daniel said, his voice firm, yet tinged with the emotion he had been holding back. "I know what you've been hiding. It's time we talk about everything. About Carmen. About the lies. I can't keep pretending I don't know." Ramona's expression shifted from feigned calm to something darker, something guarded. She stepped back, allowing him to enter, but her eyes never left him. The tension in the room was palpable. "I already told you everything I could," she said, trying to sound casual. But Daniel could hear the underlying panic in her voice. "There's nothing more to discuss." "No," Daniel said, shaking his head. "There's more. You've been hiding the truth from me my entire life. You've kept me in the dark about my mother, about everything. I need to know why." Ramona hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering with fear. Then, as if the weight of everything she had been holding in finally broke, she sat down heavily on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It's not what you think, Daniel," she said, her voice soft and full of sorrow. "I did it to protect you. Your mother, she was involved in things that I couldn't let you be a part of." Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. "What kind of things? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe she was dead?" Ramona's eyes welled with tears as she looked up at him. "I never wanted you to know the truth. Your mother was mixed up with dangerous people who would have hurt you if they knew you were alive. She wanted to get away from them, to protect you, but she couldn't escape. And when she came to me, I knew I had to protect you, no matter what." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. His mind raced with the implications of what Ramona was saying. His mother, the woman he had spent his life wondering about, had been involved with criminals, with people who would have hurt him if they knew the truth. It made sense now. The secrecy, the lies, the way Ramona had always kept him at a distance from his past. But why, Ramona? Daniel's voice broke, the anger and sadness rising in his chest. "Why didn't you tell me the truth? Why did you lie to me for all these years?" Ramona looked down at the floor, unable to meet his gaze. "I couldn't risk you knowing. I thought it would be better if you thought she was dead. If you never knew the truth, you would be safe. I couldn't let you be part of her world, Daniel. I couldn't let you fall into the same trap she did." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. The betrayal, the years of lies, it all seemed so overwhelming. "So, you thought it was better to lie to me? To rob me of the truth? I deserve to know what happened to my mother, Ramona. You owe me that much." Ramona stood up, her face pale and exhausted. "I did what I thought was best," she said softly. "I didn't want to lose you, Daniel. I couldn't bear the thought of you becoming like your mother." Daniel stared at her, his heart heavy with a mix of emotions he couldn't even name. The anger, the betrayal, the hurt. It was all too much to process. But there was something else, something that had been buried deep inside him for so long. The need to know the truth. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Ramona," Daniel said, his voice steady. "I'm asking for the truth. I need to know everything. I need to know about Carmen, about Sophia, about what happened all those years ago. I can't keep living with these questions in my head." Ramona looked at him for a long moment, and then, as if making a decision, she nodded. "All right, Daniel, I'll tell you everything. But be prepared. What you're about to hear will change everything." As Ramona began to tell Daniel the full story, the weight of the truth hung in the air like a storm ready to break. He had come here looking for answers, and now he was about to get more than he ever expected. The past, buried for so long, was finally coming to the surface, and nothing would ever be the same again. Sometimes the truth we seek comes at great cost. Daniel's journey has led him to this moment, where the lies he's lived with for so long are finally being exposed. But with every revelation comes the challenge of facing the consequences. Can he truly handle the truth, or will it shatter everything he thought he knew about himself, his family, and his past? The weight of Ramona's words hung heavily in the air. Daniel sat across from her, his mind racing, trying to process the flood of information she had just shared with him. The story of Carmen's involvement with dangerous people, the secrecy and the lies, all made sense now, yet it was still hard to believe. Ramona had been the one to protect him, but in doing so, she had kept him in the dark. For years, Daniel had wondered why his mother had never come back for him, why she had disappeared without a trace. Now he knew the truth. She had been trapped, trying to escape a dangerous world, but ultimately caught in its grip, and Ramona had been the one to hide it all from him. His mind drifted back to the night he had first met Carmen at the nursing home, the way she had looked at him, the whisper of his name. Leo. That one word had cracked open a part of his soul that had been buried for decades. Carmen was his mother, and she had been right there all along, hidden from him by the very woman he had trusted most. Daniel's anger burned as he thought about the years he had lost, the years he had spent believing lies. He had lived his entire life thinking his parents were dead, that he had no one left. But now, the truth was starting to surface, and he couldn't stop it. "You said you want to protect me," Daniel said, his voice tight with emotion. "But do you even understand what that's done to me? Do you know how many years I spent feeling like I was abandoned? How many times I asked myself why my mother didn't come back for me?" Ramona's face crumpled, and she sat down beside him, her hands trembling in her lap. "I didn't know what to do, Daniel. I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I thought it would break you." "Well, it did break me," Daniel shot back, his voice shaking. "It's broken everything I thought I knew about myself. I've spent my whole life wondering why I wasn't good enough for my mother to come back for me. And now I find out she was right there, in a nursing home, and you never told me." Ramona's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, Daniel saw her vulnerability, the cracks in facade she had spent years building. "I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought it was better for you to have a happy life, away from all the danger and pain your mother was in." Daniel stood up, pacing back and forth in the room, his anger boiling over. "And what about the truth, Ramona? You think I can just pretend everything is fine? You think I can live a life based on lies? How could you think that would be better for me?" Ramona didn't answer. She sat there in silence, her face pale and drawn, her shoulders sagging under the weight of her guilt. Daniel's anger was still raw, but it was also mixed with a deep sense of sadness. He had trusted her. She had been his rock, his family. And now, everything he thought he knew about his life had been shattered. Daniel knew he couldn't stay there. Not like this. He had to see Carmen again. He had to confront the woman who had been taken from him all those years ago. The answers were just beyond his reach, and he needed to face them head on. "I'm going to find her," Daniel said, his voice cold and determined. "I'm going to find my mother, and I'm going to find out what really happened. And no one is going to stop me." Ramona stood up slowly, her eyes searching his face. "Daniel, please. You don't understand what you're getting into. The people your mother was involved with." "I don't care about that anymore," Daniel interrupted, his voice firm. "I don't care about anything except finding out the truth. I don't care how painful it is. I need to know what happened to my mother." With those words, Daniel turned and walked out of the room, leaving Ramona standing in the silence of the house she had once filled with warmth. He didn't look back. The door slammed behind him with finality. The drive to the nursing home felt like it took forever. Daniel's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. His mind focused solely on one thing, Carmen. He couldn't shake the image of her face, the recognition in her eyes. She was alive. She had been alive all this time. He had to know why she had been abandoned, why she had been kept from him, and, most importantly, he had to understand the role his Aunt Ramona had played in all of it. When he arrived at the nursing home, he didn't waste any time. He walked straight to the office and asked to see Carmen, the director of the home, a woman who had been nothing more than a bystander in this whole ordeal. Looked at him with surprise, but she didn't protest. Carmen was in the same room where Daniel had first seen her, sitting in her wheelchair by the window, her hands resting in her lap. This time, she didn't look up when he approached, but Daniel could feel the connection, the same one he had felt the first time. It was as if she knew he was there, even though she couldn't say his name anymore. He knelt down beside her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Carmen," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need you to tell me everything. I need to know the truth about what happened to you. I need to know who I am and what you've been through." Carmen's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, Daniel thought he saw something in them, a glimmer of recognition, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "I'm here now," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion, "and I won't leave until I understand. I promise you, Carmen, I will find the truth, no matter what it takes." As Daniel stood there, looking at the woman who had been his mother, a mixture of hope and fear filled his heart. The road ahead was unclear and the truth was still elusive, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't stop now. The answers were out there, and he was ready to confront whatever came his way. The truth was waiting for him. When we seek the truth, we often find more than we expected. Daniel's journey has led him to a place where nothing is as it seemed, and every answer brings even more questions. But sometimes, the only way forward is to face the truth, no matter how painful it may be. What happens when the past catches up with us? And how do we move forward when everything we believe turns out to be a lie? The sun was setting as Daniel made his way to the small town where Sophia had been hiding for years. The truth about his mother was slowly coming into focus, but there was still so much left unanswered. Every step Daniel took was filled with anticipation, and the weight of the burden he carried seemed to grow heavier with every mile. He had learned from Mario that Sophia was not just an innocent bystander in this web of lies. She was an integral part of it. Her involvement with dangerous people had put Carmen in a position where survival meant leaving her son behind. It was a truth that was as painful as it was overwhelming, and Daniel knew he was about to face the last pieces of the puzzle. As he pulled up to the small house, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap. The house looked so ordinary, yet he knew it held the key to everything he had been searching for. He knocked on the door, his heart pounding in his chest. This time, there would be no turning back. The door creaked open, and Sophia stood before him. Her dark eyes studied him for a long moment, as though weighing a decision to let him in. "You came," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I need to know everything," Daniel said, his voice hard with determination. "I need to understand what happened. Why my mother was taken from me. Why all the lies." Sophia stepped aside, motioning for him to enter. The inside of the house was sparse, with only a few pieces of old furniture scattered around. It was as though Sophia had been hiding here for years, living in the shadows, cut off from the world. "Sit down," Sophia said, gesturing to a chair. "We have a lot to talk about." As Daniel sat across from Sophia, the weight of the moment pressed down on him. Every fiber was being screamed for answers, but a small part of him feared what he might uncover. The truth was always more complicated than we wanted it to be, and in this case, it was more painful than Daniel had ever imagined. Sophia didn't waste any time. She spoke softly but clearly, as though she had been preparing for this conversation for years. "Your mother, Carmen, was involved with dangerous people," she began. "I met her when she was trying to escape them. She had no choice, Daniel. The things she got involved in, they were bigger than both of us. Daniel's mind raced as he absorbed her words. His mother, the woman he had spent his entire life wondering about, had been involved in a criminal world. A world that had forced her to leave him behind. "I don't understand," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "How could she leave me? Why didn't she come for me?" Sophia's eyes softened, but there was a sadness in her gaze that Daniel couldn't ignore. "She loved you, Daniel, more than anything. But when she realized how deep she was in, she had to make a choice. She thought you would be better off without her, without the danger that followed her everywhere. She was trying to protect you." Daniel shook his head, frustration building in his chest. "Protect me? By abandoning me? I spent my whole life believing she was dead, and now you're telling me she was alive, just hidden away?" Sophia nodded slowly, her expression full of regret. "It wasn't that simple. The people your mother was running from, they weren't just criminals. They were dangerous. They would have killed you to get to her. Your Aunt Ramona was the only one who knew what happened. She was the one who took care of you, and she kept you in the dark because she thought it was the only way to keep you safe." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He had spent so many years trying to find answers, trying to understand why his life had unfolded the way it had. And now, the truth was more painful than he had ever imagined. The people he trusted most, the ones who had raised him, had kept him in the dark, shielding him from the reality of his mother's life. Sophia continued, her voice breaking the silence. "I tried to keep in touch with Carmen, but she disappeared. We didn't know where she went, and then the rumors started about her death. It was easier for me to believe she was gone, but she wasn't. She was still alive, still trying to protect you, even from afar." Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. "Why didn't you tell me any of this? Why didn't you try harder to find me?" Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I couldn't, Daniel. The people we were running from, they were everywhere. They had eyes on Carmen, on me, on anyone who knew her. It was too dangerous. I didn't want to put you in harm's way. I thought it would be better to let you believe she was gone." Daniel sat back in his chair, trying to absorb everything Sophia had told him. His life had been a lie, a carefully constructed lie to protect him from the world his mother had been forced into. He wasn't sure whether to feel anger, grief, or relief. The truth was out, but it left him with more questions than answers. "I need to find her," Daniel said, his voice steady, yet filled with the weight of his decision. "I need to know where she is. I need to see her. I need to understand everything." Sophia looked at him for a long moment, her face a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "I don't know where she is, Daniel, but I can help you find her. We have to be careful. Though, the people who were after her, they're still out there." Daniel nodded. The truth had opened a door, but the path ahead was still uncertain. He had to find Carmen. He had to know the woman who had given him life, and understand why she had been forced to leave him behind. As he left Sophia's house, the weight of his decision settled on him. He wasn't just looking for his mother anymore. He was searching for a closure, for redemption, for the truth that had eluded him for so long. The truth has a way of changing everything. What we think we know can shatter in an instant, leaving us to pick up the pieces. Daniel's journey is far from over, but each step brings him closer to understanding who he really is and where he comes from. Will he be able to face the truth and embrace his past? Or will the weight of the lies he's uncovered be too much to bear? The weight of the past was crushing Daniel's chest as he walked back toward his aunt's house. He had learned more than he ever expected to know, but still, there were pieces of the puzzle that didn't quite fit. Sophia had told him about Carmen's tragic past, about the danger that had haunted her life, but there were still questions left unanswered. The biggest one of all, why had Ramona done this? Ramona had lied to him for years. She had kept him in the dark, shielding him from the truth, and in doing so, she had robbed him the chance to know the woman who had given him life. He had trusted her, loved her like a mother, and now he was about to face the woman who had been the architect of his pain. As Daniel arrived at the door, his heart beat loudly in his chest. He had prepared himself for this moment for days, but the reality of it was still terrifying. How would he look his aunt in the eye and ask her the questions that had been eating at him for so long? When the door opened, Ramona's face was a picture of shock. She hadn't expected him to come back, not so soon. But there was also something else in her eyes. Fear. She knew what was coming, and she knew it was the moment she had been dreading for years. "Daniel," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "What's going on? Why are you here?" Daniel stood there, silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He could feel the anger and betrayal rising in him. But he also knew that now was the time to get the answers he needed. No more lies. No more running from the truth. "I know everything, Ramona," Daniel said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know about Carmen. I know about Sophia. And I know that you've been hiding the truth from me all these years." Ramona's face paled, and for a moment, she seemed to shrink back from him. "Daniel, please," she began, her voice soft and pleading. "You don't understand. I did what I thought was best for you. I couldn't let you be part of all that." "No," Daniel interrupted, his voice sharp. "You didn't do what was best for me. You did what was best for you. You kept me in the dark. You made me believe that my mother was dead, that I had no one left. And for what? To protect me from the truth." Ramona looked down at the floor, unable to meet his gaze. "I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered. "I didn't know how to explain what had happened. I thought if you never knew the truth, you would be safe. That's all I wanted. I wanted to protect you from the danger that was following your mother." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "And what about me, Ramona? What about my right to know? To know who I am, where I come from?" Ramona stood there, her eyes full of tears, her hands trembling. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted you to feel abandoned, but I couldn't let you be a part of her world. It was too dangerous." The silence between them was thick, suffocating. Daniel could feel the anger rising in his throat, but it wasn't just anger. It was grief. Grief for the mother he never knew. Grief for the childhood he had spent in the shadows of lies. And grief for the woman who had promised to protect him, but who had ultimately kept him trapped in a cage of secrets. "You lied to me," Daniel said, his voice cold and quiet. "You kept me in the dark for all these years. And for what? To protect me from the truth? The truth was always there, Ramona. I needed it, and you took that away from me." Ramona's face crumpled, and for the first time, Daniel saw her truly vulnerable. She wasn't the strong, protective aunt he had always known. She was just a woman who had made a terrible mistake, one that had cost them both years of pain and regret. "I was scared," she said, her voice breaking. "I was scared of what would happen if you knew the truth. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to see you hurt." Daniel felt a pang of sympathy for her, but it wasn't enough to erase the betrayal he felt. "You kept me from knowing my mother. You kept me from knowing who I am. You took that choice away from me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The room was thick with emotion, with words left unsaid. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "I need to see her," he said, his voice firm. "I need to see Carmen. I need to hear it from her. I need to know everything." Ramona's eyes widened in shock. "Daniel, please." "No," Daniel said, shaking his head. "I need to do this. For me. For my mother." With those words, Daniel turned and walked out of the house, leaving Ramona standing in the silence of her guilt. The answers were out there, but it was up to him to find them. He had come to this point, and there was no turning back now. He had made the decision. He would find Carmen. He would get the truth, no matter the cost. Sometimes, confronting the truth means facing the deepest betrayals, the hardest decisions, and the darkest secrets. Daniel's journey has led him to this moment. A confrontation with the woman who raised him and the family that kept him in the dark. But the truth, as painful as it is the only way forward. And Daniel is ready to face whatever comes next. The drive to the nursing home felt different now. The urgency, the fear, the anger, it had all faded into a quiet resolve. Daniel's hands were still gripping the steering wheel tightly, but his heart wasn't racing anymore. He had already confronted the past. He had already heard the truth from Ramona. And now, he was going to confront the one person who could truly answer all of his questions. His mother, Carmen. He didn't know if she would recognize him, if she would remember the little boy she had once held in her arms. He didn't know what would happen when he saw her again, but he knew one thing for sure. He needed to face her, and he needed to hear the truth from her own lips. The time for half-truths and secrets was over. When Daniel arrived at the nursing home, it was quieter than usual. The residents were scattered in various rooms, some asleep, some staring vacantly into space. It felt like a place frozen in time, a place where memories were lost and never found again. Daniel's footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as he made his way to Carmen's room. As he opened the door, he saw her sitting by the window, just as he had the first time. Her hair was still messy, her face still worn with the passage of time, but there was something different about her now. Maybe it was the way the light hit her face, or the fact that Daniel finally saw her for who she really was. His mother. She didn't look up when he entered, but he could feel her awareness. She was waiting for him, somehow knowing that he would come. The silence between them was thick, as though the air itself was holding its breath. "Carmen," Daniel said softly, walking toward her. "It's me. It's Daniel." For a moment, there was no reaction. Then, slowly, Carmen turned her head and looked at him. Her eyes were cloudy, distant, but there was a flicker of recognition in them, a moment of clarity. And for the first time in years, Daniel saw the woman who had given him life. She reached up with trembling hands, and Daniel instinctively knelt beside her. Her hands gently touched his face, as though trying to place him, trying to remember who he was. "Leo," she whispered, her voice hoarse but filled with a tenderness Daniel hadn't expected. "My Leo." The sound of his name on her lips shattered something deep inside him. He hadn't realized how much he needed to hear it, how much he had longed for this moment, even if it was bittersweet. "I'm here," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm here, Mom. I've been looking for you all my life. I need to know the truth. I need to understand what happened." Carmen's eyes fluttered closed, and for a moment, Daniel thought she might drift back into the world of silence that had consumed her for so long. But then, she spoke again, her voice slow and heavy with the weight of years spent in isolation. "I couldn't protect you," she murmured. "I couldn't protect you from the world, from the things I was involved in. It was better to let you believe I was gone, to let you live a life without the danger that followed me." Daniel's heart broke at her words. He had spent his entire life wondering why she hadn't come for him, why she hadn't tried to find him. And now, here she was, telling him that the very thing he feared, the truth, was more painful than he could have ever imagined. "Why didn't you tell me, Mom?" Daniel asked, his voice full of raw emotion. "Why didn't you come for me?" Carmen's hand trembled as she cupped his face. I tried, Leo, but the people I was running from, they wouldn't stop until they had me, and they would have hurt you. I couldn't let that happen." Daniel shook his head, his mind spinning with everything he had learned. "I spent my whole life thinking I was abandoned, thinking I was forgotten, and now you're telling me that you were here all along, that you want to come back for me, but you couldn't." "I'm so sorry," Carmen whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "I never wanted to leave you. I never wanted to hurt you." Daniel felt a deep, aching sorrow rise in his chest. He had spent so long searching for answers, and now, here they were, but they came with a price. The truth was more painful than he had ever imagined, and yet it was the one thing that could finally set him free. As Daniel sat there, holding Carmen's hand, he realized that the past, no matter how painful, had shaped him into the person he was. He could not change what had happened, but he could choose how to move forward. He could choose to forgive, to let go of the anger and grief that held him captive for so long. "I don't know what the future holds, Mom," Daniel said, his voice steady, "but I know I can't keep living in the past. I'm ready to move forward, to find peace, and understand who I am." Carmen smiled weakly, her face filled with a tenderness that Daniel had never known. "You're strong, Leo, stronger than I ever was. You'll be okay. You'll find your way." Daniel smiled back, the weight of his past slowly lifting. "I'll find my way," he whispered, "with or without you." As Daniel stood up, looking at his mother for the last time, he felt a sense of closure wash over him. The questions had been answered, The truth had been revealed, and the weight of his past had finally been lifted. It was time to move forward, to build a future that was his own. He walked out of the room, the weight in his chest finally gone. The journey was over, but his life was just beginning. He had faced the past, and now he was ready to embrace the future. Sometimes the truth we seek is more painful than we ever imagined, but it is only through facing that truth that we can truly heal. Daniel's journey has brought him to this moment, where he must decide how to move forward, armed with the knowledge of his past and the strength to create a future of his own. The road ahead is uncertain, but the truth will guide him. The morning sun poured through the window, casting warm light across the quiet room. Daniel stood by the window, staring out at the city below. The hustle and bustle of life continued outside, but inside, everything felt different. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. The storm that had raged in his heart for so long had finally calmed. He had faced the truth about his mother, about Ramona, and about the lies that had defined his life. The road to this moment had been filled with pain, anger, and betrayal, but it also led him to understanding, to healing. And now, for the first time, Daniel felt like he could finally breathe. The weight of the past no longer pressed down on him. The questions, the doubts, the fears, they had been answered, and now he was free to move forward. The road to healing hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Daniel had spent months processing everything he had learned, piecing together the broken fragments of his past. The truth about his mother's life, the lies Ramona had told, and the role they both played in shaping his future. It was all a heavy burden to bear. But with time, Daniel had come to terms with it. He had forgiven Ramona. She had done what she thought was best, even though it had been the wrong choice. She had lied to protect him. But in doing so, she had kept him from knowing the truth. It wasn't easy forgiveness, but it was one that allowed him to move on. And as for Carmen, Daniel had found closure. She may not have been the perfect mother, but she had loved him in her own way. The love she had for him had been buried beneath years of pain and regret, but it was real. She had never abandoned him intentionally. She had been trapped in a world she couldn't escape, and in the end, she had done what she thought was best for him. As the days passed, Daniel began to focus on his future. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. He still had to rebuild his life, redefine who he was, and figure out what he wanted to do next. But for the first time in his life, he didn't feel lost. He felt ready to face whatever came next. He had always been driven by success, by the need to prove himself, to build an empire. But now, he realized that success meant something different. It wasn't about money or status or power. It was about finding peace within himself, about healing from the past, and about building meaningful relationships with those he cared about. Daniel reached out to the people who mattered most. He reconnected with old friends, people he had pushed away during his years of focus on work and success. He reached out to those who had been there for him, even when he hadn't been there for them. And in doing so, he began to rebuild the connections he had neglected. He also took time to focus on his health, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. He knew that in order to move forward, he had to take care of himself. He started exercising, eating better, and making time for things that truly mattered, his personal growth and well-being. And most importantly, he found peace with his past. The weight of the secrets and the lies that haunted him for so long no longer held power over him. He had faced them, understood them, and let them go. One afternoon, as Daniel sat in his office, reflecting on everything that had happened, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Ramona. "I know you've been through so much, Daniel," she wrote, "but I'm proud of you. You become the man I always hoped you would be. I love you, and I hope one day we can talk, really talk, and heal together." For the first time, Daniel felt a sense of acceptance. He didn't need to hold on to the anger anymore. He didn't need to carry the weight of the past. He was ready to build a future that was his own, a future that wasn't defined by secrets or lies, but by honesty, love, and healing. He typed back a simple message. "Thank you, Ramona. I'm ready to heal, and I hope we can find a way to move forward together." Daniel sat back in his chair, looking out at the city below. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, he didn't fear it. He was ready to embrace whatever came next. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be his to walk. And as he thought about the journey he had been on, the pain, the heartbreak, and eventual healing, he knew one thing for sure. He had found his way. The truth had set him free, and now he was free to live the life he had always wanted. In the end, we are all shaped by our past, but we're not defined by it. Daniel's journey was one of discovery, forgiveness, and healing. He learned that the truth, no matter how painful, is the key to freedom. And by accepting his past and facing it head-on, he was able to build a future filled with peace, hope, and new beginnings. The road ahead may be uncertain, but Daniel is finally ready to walk it. Sometimes, the greatest challenge we face is letting go of the past and embracing the future. Daniel's story shows us that no matter how dark the journey may seem, there's always a path forward. Healing is possible, and with courage and determination, we can overcome even the most difficult of obstacles. The past does not define us. It only shapes us into who we are meant to be. The city had never looked so bright to Daniel. For the first time in years, he felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. The weight of the past, the lies, and the heartbreak, all of it, seemed to fade away as he stood on the rooftop of his office building. Looking out at the horizon, Daniel had been through a journey of discovery, loss, and healing. He had uncovered painful truths about his family, about his past, but had also found strength, resilience, and a new sense of purpose. His life was no longer defined by the lies he had been told. It was defined by the man he had become through the pain and the healing. He had found his mother, Carmen, and while the truth had been difficult, it had been a crucial part of his journey. He had faced his aunt, Ramona, and come to terms with the fact that she had tried to protect him, but in doing so, had robbed him of the truth he had longed for. He had forgiven her as much as he could, and he let go of the anger that had held him captive for so long. Now, standing on that rooftop, Daniel realized that the past no longer had a hold on him. The future was his to create. Daniel had made a choice to stop living in the shadows of the past and to embrace the future. He had faced the truth, no matter how painful, and he had accepted it. But the final step in his journey was not about finding the answers. It was about what he would do with them. He thought about everything he had learned, the choices Carmen had made, the sacrifices she had endured, and the truth that had been hidden from him for so long. He thought about Ramona, the woman who had raised him, who had protected him in her own way, but had also kept him in the dark. He thought about the years he had spent wondering about his past, about who he really was. And now he understood. He understood that the truth wasn't about blaming anyone or holding on to the past. It was about accepting who he was, where he came from, and using that knowledge to create a future filled with purpose and peace. That afternoon, Daniel sat down with Ramona. The tension between them had been heavy, but now it felt different. They had both been through so much, and it was time to finally talk, to finally heal. "I've been thinking about everything, Ramona," Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. "About everything you did for me, about the lies, and about the truth. I don't blame you. I don't want to hold on to the anger anymore. I want to move forward." Ramona's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. "I never meant to hurt you, Daniel. I was just trying to protect you. But I see now that I made things worse. I'm sorry." Daniel nodded, his heart full of emotion. "I know you were trying to protect me, but I need to let go of the past. I can't keep living in it." The air between them felt lighter now, as if the weight of years of lies and secrets had finally been lifted. They sat there for a while, not speaking, just sharing the silence. For the first time, Daniel felt a sense of peace in their relationship, something he hadn't felt in years. The next few months were a time of rebuilding for Daniel. He focused on his work, his health, and his relationships. But more than that, he focused on his own growth. He took the time to reflect on everything he had learned about himself, his family, and the world around him. He started therapy, something he had always avoided, and began to heal from the emotional wounds that had held him back for so long. He reconnected with old friends, and even started dating again, this time with a clear understanding of who he was and what he wanted out of life. But most importantly, Daniel learned how to let go of the past. He stopped being a prisoner to the lies and secrets and started to live authentically. He learned that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the actions of others. It was about freeing himself from the burden of anger and resentment. One evening, As Daniel walked through the city, he looked up at the sky. The stars were just beginning to appear, twinkling in the vast expanse of night. For the first time in years, Daniel felt truly free. He had come to terms with his past, and now he was ready to face the future with a sense of peace and purpose. As he walked, he thought about everything that had brought him here: the pain, the grief, the confusion, and finally, the clarity. He had learned that the truth, while painful, was the key to unlocking his freedom. And now he was free. We are all shaped by our past, but we don't have to be defined by it. Daniel's journey is one of healing, growth, and redemption. He learned that the key to moving forward is not in holding on to the past, but in letting go of it. And in doing so, he found the peace and freedom he had been searching for all along. The road ahead may be uncertain, but Daniel is ready. He has faced the truth, embraced his past, and now he can finally walk forward with confidence and a new sense of purpose. The future is his to create. No matter where you are in your journey, remember that the past doesn't define you. The truth may hurt, but it will also set you free. Let go of the pain, embrace the lessons, and create the life you deserve. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of discovery, forgiveness, and healing. Daniel's story shows us that even though the past may shape us, we always have the power to move forward into a future full of hope and purpose. If this story touched your heart and you want to hear more inspiring tales like this one, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Make sure to turn on the bell notification so you never miss out on our upcoming episodes filled with inspiration, self-growth, and love. Remember, the power to change is in your hands. See you in the next video.